In 2021, we all witnessed what chaos followed when a massive ship, Ever Given, got stuck in the Suez Canal, blocking billions of dollars worth of cargo each day. But actually, there's another waterway that's way more important than the Suez Canal: the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow passage, just a bit over 30 miles wide, which is even smaller than Luxembourg. But its importance is more than you can imagine. If any country somehow manages to block this strait, no one can stop World War III from coming. Now, why is this tiny waterway so important? This little strait is the only route for ships traveling between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Around the Persian Gulf, there are 8 countries, and 4 of them rely entirely on the Strait of Hormuz to reach the rest of the world's oceans. These countries are major players in the oil game. Roughly 2/3 of the world's proven, regular oil reserves, totaling around 674 billion barrels, are contained within the Persian Gulf. But how is World War III connected to it? Well, if you control those 30 miles of the Strait of Hormuz, you basically control the majority of the oil supply. So, whoever controls this tiny stretch of water has immense power. Power that could shape the fate of the entire world. Ships are the main way to move stuff between continents because they're cheaper than airplanes, especially for big loads. They handle about 80% of all the stuff we trade around the world. There are around 118,928 merchant ships out there, with a total gross tonnage of 1.47 billion. These ships travel along specific paths called trade routes that link continents together. But it's not always easy sailing because there are natural obstacles like narrow passages and rocky areas that can block the way. When these routes get blocked, it can mess up the world economy pretty badly. Now, coming back to the Strait of Hormuz that connects 2 important bodies of water, the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. These 2 gulfs are like doorways to the bigger ocean for countries like Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman. These countries are extremely important for oil export, which is a big deal for the whole world. Oil gives us a lot of the energy we need, like for cars and factories. But because oil is found in only certain places and it's not something we can make more of, it's super important to keep the routes to get it safe and open. That's why places like the Strait of Hormuz are really crucial. The biggest of these oil fields is Gawa in Saudi Arabia, which gives almost 6% of all the oil we use. Also, in this area, there's about 40% of all the natural gas we know about. Qatar is the top producer of liquefied natural gas, and Iran has the most natural gas. Together, the Persian Gulf area has more oil and natural gas than anywhere else on Earth. About 1/3 of all the oil we use and 1/5 of the natural gas comes from here, and the Strait of Hormuz is the only route for them to serve the whole world. There are some challenges though. The strait has 8 big islands and ships have to be careful not to hit them. Iran controls most of these islands, and there's been a dispute over some islands between Iran and the United Arab Emirates since the 1970s. Some areas in the strait are too shallow for big ships to go through, and there's often poor visibility because of islands, dust storms, fog and haze, especially in the summer. To help ships get through safely, the UN has set up a plan where ships stick to 2 lanes, one for coming in and one for going out. These lanes are 2 miles wide each, with a 2-mile wide buffer zone between them. But it's still tough for the biggest ships to navigate through because they have to go through waters that belong to Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman, and there could be obstacles in the way. The majority of the oil that comes out of the Gulf heads towards East Asia. About 76% of it goes to just 5 countries. China, which brings in the most oil in the world and is the second biggest economy, relies a lot on the oil that travels through the Strait of Hormuz. It gets around 45% of its oil from 8 countries near the Persian Gulf. Japan, the 4th largest economy, depends even more on this oil. Japan doesn't have many natural resources, so it relies heavily on oil and liquefied natural gas to power over 80% of its energy needs. Almost all of this is imported, and nearly 80% of it comes from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz. That means almost half of Japan's energy, which fuels its economy, travels through this narrow waterway. South Korea, the 14th largest economy globally, faces similar challenges. It gets nearly 63% of its oil from the Persian Gulf states. Since oil is used for over 40% of South Korea's energy, about a third of its energy has to be shipped through the 30-mile-wide Strait of Hormuz. If something were to block or close the strait for a long time, it would bring the economies of the second, third, and 10th largest countries to a sudden stop. It would also cut off the main source of income for the 8 countries around the Persian Gulf, causing big problems that could hurt the entire world economy. Plus, if the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage for ships, gets shut down, it's hard to find other ways to move oil and natural gas. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have pipelines to send some oil elsewhere, but they can only handle a very small part of what usually goes through the strait. Making more pipelines or infrastructure to bypass the strait will be too costly. The United States has bases in many countries around the Gulf, like Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Iraq. They even have an Air Force base in Qatar, Al Udeid Air Base, and a big Navy presence, the 5th Fleet in Bahrain. This fleet includes 2 carriers, 20 ships, 103 strike aircraft, and approximately 20,000 sailors and Marines. The US has all this to make sure oil keeps flowing smoothly and to push back against Iran, which it hasn't been friendly with since 1980. The relationship between the 2 sides of the strait, Iran and the US, is still tense. That's why Iran was threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz sometimes. But they can't really do it easily because the United States has a prominent Navy presence there. If they do anything too aggressive, it's likely the US and its friends, especially Saudi Arabia, would hit back hard. For example, in 2019, things got intense between the US and Iran. The US sent a bunch more troops to hang out in the Persian Gulf and slapped Iran with some fresh new sanctions. Then, everything got even crazier in early 2020 when the US took out a big-shot Iranian general with a drone. As revenge, Iran started attacking US military bases in Iraq, leading to a full-on war, which would have been a disaster. But eventually, things calmed down a bit after that, but tensions are still pretty high there. If that was not enough, tensions between Iran and Israel have also been getting worse lately. It all started when Iran attacked Israel with missiles and drones, depending on a suspected Israeli strike on an Iranian consulate in Syria. This was also seen as a response to Israel attacking an Iranian building in Damascus and killing some important military people. People are worried this could lead to a bigger fight in the area. They're talking about things like terrorism, attacking US friends and interests, blocking the Strait of Hormuz, cyber attacks, and going after US military stuff in the area. Even though Iran has talked about blocking it because of US sanctions on their oil, the law says everyone can use it. Also, Iran just set up another place to send oil from, so they don't have to rely as much on the Strait of Hormuz. So, what do you think? Would Iran dare to take such a misstep? Can we afford a world war now just for this? Share your thoughts below. And remember, the fate of nations lies not just in the hands of leaders, but in the choices we make collectively. Subscribe for more insights on geopolitics and hit the notification bell to stay informed.